Hello, everyone. Welcome to another screening series Q&A. My name is Camelia Shofani, and I'm the Senior Manager of Public Programs and Events here at the International Documentary Association. For our blind or low vision attendees, I'm going to visually identify myself. I have dark hair, dark eyes, light skin, and I'm wearing a black sweater vest. I'd like to thank our media sponsors for bringing this event to us, KCRW and Variety. This evening, we'll be having a conversation between film critic Amy Nicholson and director Kathlyn Horan, whose film The Return of Tanya Tucker, featuring Brandi Carlile, had its world premiere at South by Southwest earlier this year. For more information on our screening series, lineup, and other Q&As, please visit documentary.org/screening-series. As always, before we get started, I'd like to offer a brief land acknowledgement. We recognize the Gabrielino Tongva as the past, present, and future caretakers of the land, water, and cultural resources in the unceded territory of Los Angeles. So with that, I give you Amy and Kathlyn. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the IDA Award Spotlight Series. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Amy Nicholson. I am the moderator of today's discussion with the director of The Return of Tanya Tucker, featuring Brandi Carlile, who I will introduce in just a second. First, a little bit about me. I am a film critic here in Los Angeles, and for those who are visually impaired, I am wearing a lavender striped shirt, and I have long blonde hair and bangs. And I'd also like to say right before we begin, a thank you to our interpreter for today, Cheryl Henderson, who will be joining us in ASL. And now it is my pleasure to welcome the director of The Return of Tanya Tucker, Kathlyn Horan.
Great, thanks, Amy. It's very excited to be here. I'm the director of The Return of Tanya Tucker, featuring Brandi Carlile, and I'm wearing a jean shirt, dirty blonde hair, and gold-rimmed glasses.
I think we have about the same hair color.
I was gonna, yeah, exactly, yeah. Look better on you.
Oh no, I love yours. Yours got the waves. Kathlyn, I was thinking we should take a moment to note right at the top of this conversation that we're speaking shortly after the news broke of Loretta Lynn's passing at the age of 90. And, among many moments of musical history that your film includes, you also do give us this personal glimpse into what Loretta was like as a friend. Mm-hmm. We also get footage of her taking in a concert that's in her honor. And I was imagining this is footage that must feel pretty special to you to have today.
Yeah, thank you for acknowledging that. And it is, I woke up to that this morning, and it's been on my mind as of late because her health has not been great. And I've been wanting to bring her to a screening and to show her the film. And one of the most special moments of that entire film was the moment before Tanya's about to go on stage at the Exit Inn. We're in there filming, and she gets a phone call from Loretta Lynn. And I was like, my God, I can't believe I'm witness to this incredible friendship, and her friend who's there with her every step of the way. And from the song that you get to see inspired by Loretta, you really get to see the intergenerational friendships of Brandi to Tanya, Tanya to Loretta. And I knew that they were friends, but before filming, I didn't understand the real depth that in connection and bond that they have with one another. So it's a tough day, a tough loss all around. And I'm sending lots of love to Loretta's family, to Tanya, and to Brandi. So it's been a tough morning.
I'm so sorry. And I think, on behalf of all of us who have watched the film, we want to thank you for, using your career to spotlight these amazing women who changed musical history while we still have them, while we're able to catch moments of them, and on that note about Tanya, she says several times in this film that she does not like the word comeback, that her favorite word is the word revival. Sure. But you chose a third word for the title of the doc. You chose the return of Tanya Tucker. How did you settle on that?
Well, there's a couple of ways. She also likes relaunch. She basically likes everything but comeback. And I got to understand that comeback was very specific. And like she says, I've come back so many times, who's going to believe me now? And also she says, comeback, where did I go? I've been here all along. So it's a complicated term with someone with such a legacy and such a life. And she's right, you know, she didn't go anywhere. She has been around, but musically, she hadn't made an original record. So to me, Return is number one. It felt like it made more sense, and I knew she would like that. It also harkens to some Western films, which I knew she would dig as well. So I was like, we'll find a spot that I know that she gets and understands the concept, but it just feels a little bit like, you know, a little more cool, a little more edgy, a little more Tanya with a Return, with some
No, I
Western
get
thought.
You're right. Outlaws don't get revived. Outlaws return.
Exactly. Outlaws never go away. No.
But I mean, this is the first time I've seen a documentary with the subtitle too, like the one you've got featuring Brandi Carlile. I've never
Yeah.
seen a title with that at all. That's like, it's like a checklist. And I mean, I feel like
Exactly.
that speaks to, I'm assuming, how important Brandi was to you in kind of constructing this film.
Oh yeah. I mean, this film was actually Brandi's idea, or the way this film came to pass. Or I'll give you the origin story, which kind of explains that process. I got a text from Brandi's wife, Kathlyn, on a Sunday morning that said, "You want to hear something crazy?" And so, of course, I did. So we hopped on the phone with a little trepidation, because I'm always wondering, like, I have a feeling there's going to be like something amazing, but not a lot of time. And so we got on the phone, and Brandi told me she had this opportunity that Shooter Jennings, Waylon Jennings' son, had gotten in touch with her, and that he was going to be producing Tanya's first record in 17 years of original music. And Tanya and Brandi, of course, said, like, well, I've got to do this with you. Shooter knew she was such a fan. And then Brandi talked to Rick Rubin, who had done Johnny Cash's American Recording, seeking his advice and counsel, just overall, like, how do you work with a legend? Like, how do you approach this kind of thing as a producer? And one of the things that Rick said to her was, make sure you document this. And so she asked me to document it, and I said yes, or I think I said hell yes. And when do we start? And she said tomorrow.
Tomorrow. That must be even worse than you thought.
Exactly. But luckily, I just said, give me an hour and let me make some calls and see what I can pull together. And my DP, Jessica Young, who I always work with, strangely, cosmically happened to be available, and had another friend and my favorite sound person. Like all the people that we needed to pull this off were ready and available, and also huge fans and understand being in the music space and how to disappear. And like it was incredibly, like it was a perfect alignment for all of this to happen. And then on day two, I thought, like, I've never had an experience like this in a studio. And I went to Tanya's team and to Brandi and said, I've got to keep filming beyond the studio. We didn't have any specific plans what was going to happen. And so they trusted me, and I kept sticking around and filming things.
I mean, it's interesting because, like, I know that you and Brandi have this bond, you know, and that you've worked together before in the past on films you've made about her.
Yep.
I was thinking watching this that she almost seems to be your on-screen proxy.
Yep.
She's sort of asking her the things that you would want to ask, but you are choosing a fly in the wall approach and letting them talk.
Exactly. And she's a natural, like, she's a naturally curious person. And she, number one, got to meet her hero, and then to have this opportunity as a kid to grow up listening to her, to be influenced not just by her music, but, as she says in the film, by her toughness. And there weren't a lot of women in country music. I will put Loretta as the other in that category. Wanda Jackson is this other women that brought that toughness to the forefront. But Tanya had her own particular brand of that. And so Brandi, to have her there, was just naturally asking all of these questions, to your point, that I would also ask. And then as the film moved forward, I wanted to do something without talking head interviews, because what we were capturing in real time was so beautiful and intimate and vulnerable and profound, that Brandi just did exactly what I would have wanted. And it was incredibly, you know, it wasn't for the film, it was for her naturally having this opportunity to be this close to someone that's influenced her so much. And then that just continued outside of the studio and through the rest of the film, that, you know, she wasn't just stepping forward to produce a record, which often producers will do, and then they move on. And Brandi really wanted this holistic participation in everything as this record came out, as Tanya stepped back into the spotlight. which, you know, she wasn't really like, she had a lot of reservations, as you see in the film, of this. And, you know, she still does. It's like she has a complicated relationship with that. But when you have a sidekick to help pull you along, it makes it all that much more fun. And so I think that's what a lot of what Brandi provided for her. And while the film, Brandi is very present in the film and you get to know her, the film is still about Tanya, but Brandi provides us that journey through the through line.
No, it's true. Like, it never occurred to me until I saw this film how similar the careers of documentarian and documentary filmmaker are to record producer.
Yeah.
That these are both jobs where that seem to be, from what I was watching in your film, about listening for the story that needs to be told.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're exactly right. And it's like you come with wanting to bring forth out the best of whatever you're seeing and the truth, you know. And I think that was also, and every film can be different. Like if I started another film about Tanya Tucker today, it would be like a different record. You know, I learned so much and I would take a different tact forward. But you're right. I actually hadn't thought about that, but you're absolutely right that there's major similarities there for sure.
Although I guess you have the bonus of getting to access all this incredible archival footage that you turned up. I mean, just the different stages of Tanya's career. First, that just sounds fun to sift through.
It was. It was. We had learned that she had in her basement, she had a warehouse space, and that they had kind of condensed and moved everything to the basement of her house. And so we got free reign to head into her basement and pull through boxes and boxes of stuff that were tacitly organized. And I think they had been organized at some point in many years past. And so we pulled, you know, one box, I would find like a People magazine with her and Glenn Campbell, a photo of her, you know, at 6 years old playing in a bar, and then actually found her baby teeth. Like, so it was incredible. And then the stuff that I was looking for that she had told me existed, which was Super 8 film of her growing up, that her dad had filmed a lot of stuff, but she said, I think it's somewhere in a trailer in Oklahoma and I haven't heard from that guy. I was like, well, I'm going to find it for sure through this process. And in the very back corner underneath about 20 other boxes was, I open the box and pull out all of these reels of, actually they're right there. All of these reels of, that's the restrung reels in the corner, but all of the reels of Super 8 film, some are still probably in that somewhere in Oklahoma, but we found just tons and tons of incredible Super 8. And not only was it, I mean, film is gorgeous and it allowed us to continue the verite. Like I wanted these archival dips to feel a bit dreamlike and also like our verite. So it wasn't like a, let me tell you this thing now, kind of piece by piece. So Brady Hammis, our editor, Toby Shemin, our supervising editor, we came up with this pathway to weave this journey in and out. And the Super 8 film made that completely possible because it felt a lot like what you're seeing in the verite present day footage. And and they also shot it really well. I will give major props to her dad and her brother, who, like, there's a tracking shot of her on a horse from a car. It's like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you for thinking to do a tracking shot of 7-year-old Tanya.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the editing choices that I really admire that you put together is there's kind of a quick modern glimpse of her in a studio meeting Brandi's daughter for the first time and kind of having this offhand muttering almost to herself, like, oh, she should go to Hollywood, but oh, well, acting or being in the public eye mess her up. Mm-hmm. And it feels like you use that as a springboard to go back to her youth and how she was scrutinized.
Yeah, you're right. And that was the toughest part, was finding the entryways and exit points. I mean, first of all, there's all of I'd say the toughest part of all of this is the construction of that and finding you have a person who has a 50-year career, right? And since she started performing, and how do you can't tell one person's story. Tanya should have like 30 different films. And so, but what do we need to let people know about her to understand how important the present is, inform the past, but also give you the space to go and learn more about her from this film? So then it was like, here are the things we really want to say, but also let's be free about it. And what is she talking about? And what's on her mind, and finding those key lines for the entry point and exit point. Where do we go from here? Was definitely the hardest part of putting this film together. I mean, it was fun, but it was hard. it was tough. And you've left a lot out, but that always is like, oh crap, there's so much more to say.
Well, yeah. And I mean, with all of these ways in, with all of these storylines, past and present, how did you settle on the opening image that you did choose? This image of her like putting on makeup before a show and, kind of comparatively unglamorous in cramped quarters.
Yeah, that's a good question. The moment that happened, and she says to herself, as Tanya's getting prepared to go play at the Troubadour, which is a legendary, I think a lot of people are familiar with the Troubadour. So she's going into this hallowed ground space, and she was incredibly nervous. And I thought, I was shocked that this person who had been performing, since she was a child for decades, was terrified to go on stage. And so in that moment, in the, cold open version of the film, and the moment that happened, I was like, that's got to be the opening of the film. Like, she's in the return and the comeback, you see this like gorgeous country star getting her hair done, does a shot of tequila, grabs a cigarette, and says, all you got to do is sing. And that's what she's telling herself, like as a mantra, like, this is all you got to do. So it felt like the best kickoff for this film possible. And to see someone to enter with the vulnerability, see this, like the country music kind of icon moment, and doing a shot of tequila, shot of courage is also a ever-present bit through the film, for sure.
Well, it even is, though, still startling to hear her say, like, flat out later on that she hates performing, doesn't really like performing, and I kept wanting to try to find that to not be true. I mean, Tanya is this woman who's been like in front of cameras pretty much most of her life. I mean, she's even done like 2 seasons of a reality show.
Yeah,
but you see her be kind of cagey about compliments, cagey about too much introspection, I feel like, as well. I mean, how did you find her as a subject?
Yeah, you're right about all of that. And I will say, I mean, part of the exploration of this is she's a perfectionist through and through. And the reason she doesn't like performing is that the sound is never right. There's a lot of scenes, the 5-6 hour version of this film, you see her in rehearsals and a lot of these different scenes, and just not, the band doesn't sound right. Her ears, the in ears from monitoring don't sound right. And it's a continual struggle for her. But I think that's a lot what it comes down to, is that the sound just isn't right. And I think she probably hears her dad, and in her mind a lot of times, that, it's got to be perfect, you got to do it. So that part of it it's a little bit tough, because she's so incredible and she sounds so good, and you want her to take it in, just as a human, being present around her. But she is so charismatic, and like she also said to me, I don't do anything unless it's on camera, which is like one of the greatest things you could ever. So the struggle with that is, I think she likes to be documented and likes the process. The performing stuff is hard for her because she's a perfectionist, and her self-deprecation, like there's a balance between perfectionism and, some kind of maybe self-destruction to some degree. And she kind of vacillates between the two, which is also, I think, why her music is so great, and her voice and her ability to, like, there's a scene in there and Brandi's talking about, it sounds like she wrote a lot of the songs, which she is now writing her own music. But I think she has this ability to connect with a lot of the depth of things, and she'll present sort of jokey on the surface. But if you listen to her delivery of lyrics and the songs she chooses, these deep, dark Southern Gothic things, like, she's a woman with an incredible amount of depth, an incredible amount of empathy. And she's honestly like one of the most fascinating people I've ever had the privilege to spend time around. And I could have kept filming her and hanging out with her if they would have allowed. If we would have had the budget, I would still be filming today and never finish this film. So it's like truly, truly extraordinary, fascinating. And I'm also a Southern from the South. And so she's got the sort of Southern Western piece, and I very much gravitate towards the type of woman that she is.
Yeah, I love that line where Brandi calls her like a birthday present in a way that is both good and bad.
Yeah, exactly.
But like with all of this, you know, kind of like caution, awareness, tension in the studio, you know, studio is like such an intimate kind of sacred space for an artist. How were you just on a practical level able to kind of be in there with your team, have these, you know, shots that feel very close and personal without at all, I would be in my own head terrified that I'm a distraction to a physical idol.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beginning. That's definitely what it felt like. But I think part of the key with that was Jessica, my DP. She'd been in and around studios, and we've worked together enough that like it needed to be her. And I shot a good bit of the film, but later on and not the studio. I was like, we're going to do one camera, only Jessica. And we, you know, mic'd different rooms. Everybody was on a lav and just hid away. And so the only person that was really present outside of popping in to listen to things when the moments were right and they're doing playbacks, we could gather around. But it really was up to Jessica and her Amira and like some prime lenses switching in and out. And they all said to us, you know, we became like background, but we also became like part of the team. So the key to that is having the right people that to be present who know how to disappear, because it is, to your point, like the studio is sacred, and that experience in itself was a level of vulnerability I've never experienced. Tanya was, as you see in the film, nervous, not only recording in a new way, but also having cameras around, because she had her own person there filming some, taking pictures. So, but it all just became weirdly like family, and knowing Brandi and Phil and Tim already before that was obviously also helpful. So it wasn't like a complete unknown entity. So we had already some trust built there. But that's one of the things I do feel that we really wanted to get across in this film is the creativity and the intimacy of that studio and the time they had together, which it's one of those things where like, this is incredibly interesting to me and I want to make it interesting to everyone else, but it's very static. And you know, it's almost half the film, but so it is that was also like, I hope this comes across as beautiful and intimate as it is. And I hope we pulled that off.
Well, I think it's so valuable to bring out this side of her as an artist, because I think for, you know, a lot of people who kind of grew up later, like Tanya was known through the hardship in her life that was covered by the tabloids.
Yeah.
And I felt like watching it, you decided to make that you preferred to cover how the tabloids covered it instead of instead of going to ground zero and kind of digging it back up again.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that, to be honest with you, I feel like the criticisms we'll get on the film is like all of that kind of stuff. But the point, or I guess of the journey of this film, is all of that stuff overshadowed her talent. And there's a lot of already pieces about that. Like there's lots of those kind of Lifetime A&E biography, BBC pieces that basically just cover that part of her life. And this is one part of her life. She and Glenn Campbell were together for 1.5 years. In the scope of her career, it's like, we have to acknowledge it because of what it did and you know, changed the course of her career unfairly, in my opinion. And I think probably in anyone's opinion, but you know, she, to Brandi's point, you know, she didn't behave how a woman was supposed to behave in country music. And the Tanya today, you know, would have perhaps like less attention on that than the Tanya then. And obviously that's why I was gravitated towards her, is because of what she went through, what she put up with, what men were allowed to do. You know, if you're at a male outlaw and you're late for a show, like that's showbiz, you know. But for her, she was under all this pressure because of her just being herself and living the way that she wanted to live. So I wanted to at least acknowledge that those pieces were there, show how they were formative and effective. But I want you to pay attention to her as the person and the voice that often got overlooked. You know, I mean, there are those that that get underneath of all of that, like myself, like Brandi, and obviously legions of fans that saw through that. And as the fans say, like our Tanya, like I wanted to show who our Tanya is to the rest of the world that perhaps only saw the Inquirer headlines back in the day.
Oh yeah, and you keep Glenn Campbell to one soundbite, just one little snippet.
Yeah.
But it feels like you chose something that felt very telling.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that was their very long, that was another one that was a big thinker, and how much do you show and what part acknowledged. And for that one, again, we used basically Tanya's in an interview and they're asking her exactly what I just described, like what happened. And she's like, well, it was the 70s. It was Glenn Campbell, and kind of took her version of those events in her interview. And we demonstrated them in the archival, kind of keeping it with like, we don't really, it's like, I don't necessarily have an opinion on Glenn Campbell and their relationship, but we need to acknowledge the pieces that came through, and in her telling of it, acknowledging the parts of it that negatively affected her. So it's not necessarily a commentary on her feelings for Glenn Campbell. She has deep love for him, but the piece that he held at that time, and the reality of what that relationship set forth.
Right. Just to hear him say, I like her because she's crazy about
it. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes when it's like a man of a certain age with someone decades younger, I have no doubt the love that they had at all. Yeah. But at that position in time, it's tough to have a balanced relationship in those age differences, for sure.
But I appreciate that the generation gap that most interests you is kind of the one we just talked about a second ago, this gap between, Brandi and Tanya. Yeah. Like one of the things I observed, and I'd love to hear you talk about like what really interested you in that, is like, Brandi, comes from a generation that's like, let's talk about our female heroes. Let's be female first. And when she asks Tanya to list who her female icon was, she says Elvis.
And that's true. It took her a while, like to get like her true influences, like Elvis is everything. And that's the thing, like Elvis, her style, he was ever present. In her diary, you see a segment of her diary in there. And in the diary she kept when she was 16, she's constantly talking about Elvis, and when she gets to meet Elvis, and then when he passes. And, he was truly everything to her. And you can see it in her music and the way that she performs, that she was a male influenced, like you see that her influences were men. And that was one of my favorite pieces. And actually Brandi did the score for the film, and it's my favorite piece of score when she talks about Elvis, and we get to see how, like I had read in Rolling Stone, her talking about that, like getting the pantsuit and how much Elvis was a part of it. And so then hearing her describe it also in real life was one of those, like we have to, like Loretta's a thread, Elvis is a thread. And so what shapes us, because Brandi is in real time telling Tanya how she shaped her. So it was very much combining all of these pieces and these layers together, and what makes an artist who they are. I will say eventually later on that, Tanya said, like Linda Ronstadt, she pointed out after going through a bunch of other men, but that's more like someone I admire versus an influence, because they weren't, contemporaries in that way. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. And I mean, at least this like partnership that we see kind of get forged on screen, like I read an interview that Tanya said, oh, I didn't even know who Brandi was when I met her. That like, after this film was kind of cut together, they went back into the studio. They're making a second album. I was curious, did you stop by the studio?
No, I didn't. And I was going to. We were in the midst of the rush to finish this, but the original song, so early on in the creation of this film and talking to Brandi, because she's very much a part of, she's an executive producer on the film. She did the score, and she and Tanya wrote an original song. So very early on, it's like, we have to have an original song. And she was dying to do the score. And so Ready as I'll Never Be is the original song, which plays over the credits at the end, which is very much about like Tanya losing her parents and losing heroes. And it, as Tanya's own description of herself, is ready as I'll never be. Like you get to where you can be, but we're still trying to get there. So it's like a mini documentary in a lot of ways, as Brandi says. And then they went and started went into the studio towards the end of this filming to record the new record. And most of these songs on the record are co-writes, Shooter and Brandi producing again together. And Bring My Flowers Now, which the film tracks, that song was a co-write inspired by Loretta on the While I'm Living record. And so Brandi also wanted to recognize, like, Tanya's actually a really great songwriter and needs a partner to pull these stories out of her to put them together. So there's a lot of co-written original songs by Brandi and Tanya on this next record. And I heard a little bit of it and it's incredible, but I wasn't able to go to the studio, which is a bummer. But also, you know, I got to at least hear the results of it. And we also got an incredible original song.
I mean, I do want to ask you, like, as a filmmaker, this is your third kind of musical documentary project that you've done. Your one before Brandi was on, the Indigo Girls. What is it about this combination of women and music that is so creatively inspirational to you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, music has been a huge part of I grew up and did theater and a little musical theater. And so music has been a massive, one of those people that I love all different types of music, and music and movies to me are like two of the most profound works of art. And if you can combine them together, like, what could be better? I also have the luck to have some friends in the business. Like, I grew up in Georgia and have known the Indigo Girls since I was young. I'm actually producing a documentary on them. Currently should be out the end of this. I'm not directing it because I'm too close. But that's how I met Brandi, was through them. So it kind of was just this pathway that made sense for me, things that I gravitate towards. And women in particular, you know, it's just like in our business of the film business, it's been a bit of a struggle, and I'm of a certain age coming up through it, where it's been tough to kind of break through in a lot of ways. And obviously music for women the same way. And I so gravitating towards those stories, voices that feel underrepresented or voices that feel like wildly important, but don't quite get the attention that they deserve. And also the misfits and the rebels kind of creating tension on the outside edges are the things that I gravitate towards. So the women that do that on the musical side of things, to me, is a perfect, like, 100% want to keep in this lane for sure. Maybe move out of the country. I mean, I'll continue on, like, I've just plumbed my friends up to this point. So now I've got to move on to some artists that I don't know.
And it sounds like there's a lot of stories left to tell.
Without a doubt. 100%.
Well, Kathlyn Horan, thank you so much for this conversation about the return of Tanya Tucker featuring Brandi Carlile. Like, this has been a great chat. I want to say thank you again to Cheryl Henderson, who has been translating for us. I want to thank everybody who's joining with us to watch this conversation for the IDA. Thank you.
No, it was a great conversation and great questions. I appreciate it. So yeah, hope everybody enjoyed it who watched.